Okay, so we haven't had a lot of really too exciting, or I should say fun or celebratory astrology transits for a while, with the whole Venus retrograde and the eclipses and the Saturn square Uranus. But, I think things are going to start getting better because the universe definitely has a treat for us with starting, well, really on December 29th on 2021, pretty much right as we start 2022. Jupiter is going to be entering Pisces, which is one of its home signs, one of its favorite signs to be in. And this isn't just like a typical Jupiter in Pisces transit. It's actually kind of unique and special. And in this video, I want to tell you why. Now, again, we haven't had a lot of transits to actually get excited about or celebrate, but this one is definitely worth celebrating. So before we go into what we get to celebrate and everything that amazing that's kind of going on with this transit, let's first just kind of talk about what Jupiter represents. Jupiter is what we call the greater benefic, meaning there's two benefic planets, Venus and Jupiter. They're both good planets. Jupiter is the really, really good planet, essentially. In astrology, planets signify and do things, and each planet signifies a plethora of different topics and does specific jobs. Jupiter rules over and signifies things like wisdom, faith, knowledge, philosophy, beliefs, and ideals as well. Jupiter rules over spirituality, religion, opportunities, abundance, and gratitude, and all of which of those can be really just described as jovial. Now, Jupiter is a big planet. In fact, it's the biggest planet in our solar system, and being that oftentimes planets can share significations that match their physical nature, it can be easy to guess what Jupiter might do. Jupiter being big makes things big and can blow things up and increase something in your life, for better or for worse. For example, if you have Jupiter transit your first house of the body, you can gain weight like I did. If you have Jupiter transit your fourth house, you may move into a bigger home, or if it's your second house, a bigger payday. At the end of the day, Jupiter Optimus Maximus is trying to provide more and give more. Oftentimes in life, you have to think big or get out of your head or believe in something bigger than you in order to succeed or achieve your goals and dreams or simply to just live a healthy life. Now, this is what Jupiter is all about. Now, to better understand this, let's look at how Jupiter rules the signs that are opposite the signs that Mercury rules. So where if Mercury is all about rationale and clear thinking, Jupiter asks you to look at the bigger picture, makes you ask, what if? Mercury asks you to track and look at what's in front of you, while Jupiter is the one who challenges you to see what is possible, what can, or what could be. Now, Jupiter can be idealistic at times, which can be disappointing, but oftentimes it takes dreams or a vision or an ideal to be pursued in order to attain a higher good. And oftentimes we have to believe in something before we'll ever get to see it. And that is also what Jupiter is all about. However, if you're like me and you're ruled by the planet Jupiter or have Sagittarius or Pisces placements, I'm sure you know and you can definitely understand that you can have too much of a good thing. Jupiter rules excess and can blow things out of proportion at times. Sometimes if your expectations are too high or you are too idealistic and not thinking about the tangibility of an idea, disappointment is inevitable. So it's important to temper Jupiter's optimism and excess with Saturn's pragmatism or Mercury's rationality. However, with Jupiter entering Pisces, this isn't about tempering your idealism with reality. This is about like dreaming and visioning and believing. Now, let's talk about Jupiter entering Pisces, which we really can't discuss without talking about the past 2 years. That of which when Jupiter was in Capricorn, its sign of fall, starting at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. And when it entered Aquarius, January of 2021, where it was conjoined to Saturn and still not doing all too great, Jupiter gives us hope and it gives us a vision and something to dream. And while Jupiter was, in the signs of like Saturn, well, there wasn't a lot of hope to be had. You see, Jupiter takes just about 1 year to travel 30 degrees. That typically means it takes Jupiter 1 year to travel one zodiac sign. Although since the size of the zodiac signs aren't the same, you can give or take a few months each time. Now, Jupiter first entered the sign of Capricorn in December of 2019. Now, just like Jupiter has a favorite place to be or a few favorite signs or a few favorite zodiac signs to be in, it also has a few zodiac signs it doesn't do all that well in, and one being Capricorn. Capricorn is what we call Jupiter's sign of fall or its depression. Basically, it doesn't function all that well here. If Jupiter is all about, abundance and faith and hope, and Capricorn being ruled by Saturn is all about reality, rules, and structure and boundaries, you might be able to guess easily as to why it doesn't do that well here. So anyway, Jupiter entered Capricorn in December of 2019, where you could say there was a loss of hope. Pretty ironic going into 2020. Well, anyway, Jupiter stayed in Capricorn all of 2020, where it pretty much struggled the whole time. It conjoined Pluto, which of course didn't help, and was squared by Mars during its retrograde in Aries during the late summer fall in 2020, which also didn't help. And did I mention that this was during the Saturn-Pluto conjunction too? Which, yeah, that didn't help either. Do I have a graphic for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction? No, I don't. Anyway, moving on. If you don't know what any of that means, that's okay. All that means is that the stars said 2020 was not a good year, especially for Jupiter, the planet you might want to be doing good, was not doing so good. But then everything changed in December of 2020. Going into January of 2021, we had what we call the great conjunction. The great conjunction. This might sound familiar to some of you, but the great conjunction is when Jupiter conjoins Saturn in the sky. This happens every 20 years and is a really big deal for reasons that we don't have really the time to discuss in this video. However, what I do want to say about this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was that Jupiter, by this point, had left Capricorn, its sign of fall, and then conjoined the planet of maturity, discipline, time, old people, and reality, and that's Saturn. So it's not like, it had this amazing escape through Capricorn. It went into Aquarius, hit Saturn. Things didn't get too much better. Symbolically speaking, 2020 had little to no hope for many people. And then things really changed by the beginning of the new year. Jupiter entered Aquarius, where Jupiter, being about hope and integration, was excited to be in a sign that represents society and groups of people, hoping to return to a normal life. However, this was a new normal. You see, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction we had in 2020 was the first one in air signs that we'll have for the next 200 years. The last 200 years, each Jupiter-Saturn conjunction would happen in earth signs. Each 20 years now, it'll be in air signs. So past 200 years, it was in earth signs. Now for the next 200 years, it's in air signs. So what it essentially means is that we just closed out a chapter of the past 200 years and started a new chapter of the next 200 years with these Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. This one in 2020 that we just had was the first one in air signs. Going back to the beginning of 2021 as Jupiter transited Aquarius, like I said, was definitely better. Jupiter isn't in fall and it's not in detriment and does pretty okay there, but it still had to deal with Saturn. It was in a Saturn-ruled sign, and Saturn was also still there. So while Jupiter has been more hopeful, he's had to do it within a limited means or within a certain framework. Saturn is not going to let, Jupiter get too optimistic or too excited about anything. Now, that leads us to Jupiter entering Pisces. Now, remember how I said earlier that Jupiter transits take like a year, give or take? Well, Jupiter all through the first part of 2021 transited Aquarius. But then on May 14th, Jupiter ingressed into Pisces. Let's get that. There we go. It didn't stay long. Jupiter pretty much flew through Aquarius through January through April. It dipped its toes into Pisces from May to July, or I should say May through June, and then retrograded back into Aquarius in July, where it stayed through the rest of 2021. During the short time in Pisces, Jupiter was much more hopeful. It was back home, although for just a moment. Like a way that I would analogize it is it's kind of like dealing with a long trip and then coming back home, just resting for 5 seconds, not even being able to unpack your stuff, and then going right back to work. Now, what's important about May through July of 2021 is since that's where Jupiter dipped into Pisces, that's going to give us a good idea of what's to come when Jupiter enters Pisces again. So as I go along in this video, think about what were you doing between May and July of 2021? What was increasing in your life? Did you feel more hopeful? What was better for you? And let me know what was going on for you in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please give me a like. It really helps me out. Anyway, so that brings us to now. Jupiter is wrapping up its transit in Aquarius until it enters Pisces on December 29th of 2021. And if I may say so myself, what a spectacular way to start 2022. Jupiter's transit through Pisces will feel immensely better and wonderful, especially since it's had quite a few negative transits in the past. It's like kind of like getting like a nice hot steamy shower after having only like cold ones for a really long time. Pisces is a water sign, so while it can be associated with emotion, something I want to bring attention to is Pisces being a mutable sign. Both of Jupiter's home signs are in mutable signs, and for those that don't know, the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces. Mutable signs signify change. For example, Gemini season represents the change, Wait, why isn't my pencil drawing? Oh no, I was trying to draw on the pencil. Anyway, I guess I can't draw with the pencil. Anyway, Gemini season represents the change from spring to summer. Virgo represents the change from summer to fall. Sagittarius, the change from fall to winter, which leads us to Pisces, which signifies the season in which we change from a cold winter into a warm spring. Mutable signs represents changes, and being that Jupiter's core significations are integration and learning and understanding, in order to chase a dream or a vision or believe in something greater, you have to be willing to learn to adapt or grow, all of things that, require change. However, just like Pisces represents the change from winter to spring, I do believe this Jupiter transit will signify symbolically for most people a change into a more hopeful time period and signify leaving a hopeless period or time of hopelessness. What does it take to get there? It takes Jupiter. And Jupiter's way of expressing through Pisces is through faith, forgiveness, humor. Pisces is a weird sign. It deals with the emotional state of change, it, of course, being a water and mutable sign. I personally like referring to Pisces as the true water sign. You see, water changes its state depending on its environment. Water can be liquid, gas, or solid depending on its temperature. Now, Jupiter is technically, in terms of, is actually a moist and hot planet. So Pisces is sometimes looked at as cloudy or foggy. However, it's of course sensitive to, the temperature of where it's at. And now sometimes it's easier to understand a zodiac sign by comparing it to the other zodiac sign that shares its ruler. So let's actually take a look at Sagittarius. Sagittarius, being the centaur with a bow, an arrow, is more so a character that points and shoots and is much more of a point A to point B, or in other words, trailblazer type. Then Pisces is much more non-linear. For those that are familiar with games, Sagittarius would be more like Temple Run, while Pisces would be more of like Minecraft. If you guys don't know Minecraft, pretty much it's a game where you have an abundance of resources. Time doesn't exist. There's no real end or beginning. Well, at least from what I know, I don't really play video games, but pretty much, if Sagittarius is like point and shoot, Pisces is much more, hey, you can just kind of do whatever you want. Maybe even like Grand Theft Auto is a way to do it. Maybe Grand Theft Auto is maybe not a good analogy, but you're just, with the Minecraft analogy, you're just there. If we're looking at Pisces as the sign that becomes, or I should say as the sign that comes before Aries, we could see it as the space or the archetype of like clearing your mind before you take action or before a realization of yourself or realization of your actions. So Jupiter enters Pisces pretty much right at the beginning of the year, and it's going to be transiting the whole sign all through the spring, and it will reach a pretty intense climax by the month of April of 2022. That's where Jupiter will conjoin Neptune, the more modern co-ruler of Pisces, as well as Venus. There will be a Venus conjunction. I do not have an animation for that. Bear with me. But Venus is the exalted benefic of Pisces, so this is also amazing. This is where the transit of Jupiter and Pisces takes an incredible turn. Now, I talk a lot about this in my 2022 year ahead horoscopes. If you want to know all about this, I've talked about it ad nauseum. I don't want to talk about it today. But anyway, all you got to know is that this is where things get really, really intense. Jupiter is going to be experiencing two amazing transits during its already great transit in Pisces, which this is all to say, Jupiter's transit through Pisces really, really climaxes at this point. It's going to bring this euphoric, like nostalgic sense of optimism and hope that, might be being perceived overly romantically, but, nonetheless will be a really, really sweet indulgence. I really, really like the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. I just think, as the hope kind of hits and we feel really good, this is just going to be exacerbating all of those good, squishy, feel-good feelings, essentially. I think that's what, Jupiter conjoining Neptune is going to be at the very minimum for most people. Now, this is only Jupiter's climax in Pisces. But just like how in early 2021, Jupiter dipped its toes into Pisces, Jupiter in the beginning of May of 2022 will dip into and, kind of actually start a pretty intense transit into Aries for the summer. Jupiter ingresses into Aries in the May of 2022 and will stay there until it stations retrograde in July of 2022, until it moves back into Pisces in October of 2022. That's where it'll stay for the rest of the year. This is a pretty big deal because right as Jupiter leaves the gravy train pile up in Pisces, it immediately enters Aries. Jupiter being about doing things larger than life, hope and optimism, will enter Mars' home sign of Aries, which is all about engaging and starting and attacking and confronting. This ingress is also highlighted by another pretty insane transit, which is Mars' ingress into Aries. So as you see, as I clicked the button before I was supposed to. Mars will also ingress into Aries and conjoin Jupiter. Now, Mars and Jupiter come together in the sky every so often, but the fact that Jupiter is entering Mars's house, then just a few days later, Mars actually joins the party and conjoins Jupiter is a little special and it'll be felt pretty immensely. Mars likes to initiate and compete and achieve, and if it has Jupiter's help to do its job, you know it's going to be pretty big. Now, Mars conjoining Jupiter during that May of 2022 will be pretty intense and will likely be seen as a initiating or starting something big, doing something bold, believing in your actions or doing the actions that it takes to create, the faith that you want. I personally think having a few months of feeling good and getting in touch with our spiritual selves with Jupiter and Pisces will really ignite a lot of people's passion and courage. Either way, we leave a very euphoric and sappy Jupiter and Pisces transit to a very bold and courageous Jupiter and Aries transit afterwards, kicking us off into a very intense summer with, starting something that's going to be super crazy. Then after Jupiter stations retrograde in July, it will move back into Pisces in October, where it will stay for the rest of the year. So that's pretty much this Jupiter transit. It's going to stay in Pisces all from October. And then in sometime, I believe in October, November, Jupiter will station direct, move forward through the rest of Pisces, and then it will enter Aries in December of 2022, just like Jupiter's entering Pisces in December of 2021. Now that we've gotten over a lot of the transits, I actually want to go over how this is going to be affecting each zodiac sign. So let's jump into it. Starting with Aries. So Aries, Jupiter is going to be transiting. Hold on, let me get my thing set up here. Jupiter is going to be transiting both your 12th house and your first house. Now, Jupiter rules your 9th house of spirituality and religion and far distance travel already. It also rules your 12th house of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself. I think during this time, you'll be spending a lot of time by yourself, reflecting on things. And I think you'll feel pretty good. Maybe you need some time alone by yourself to think about things and to really kind of see what feels right for you. Maybe finding some space and some time to hide away, to heal away. Jupiter is all about the good stuff. So I think this is where you're going to find the good stuff. Then Jupiter will ingress into Aries, where I think as we get into the spring and summer, that little rest will charge you up. You're going to be doing big things, expanding yourself, really initiating a lot. So this looks like a really like a time where I think it's going to be a lot of rest, and then that turns into a lot of action almost immediately afterwards. Taurus. So Jupiter actually rules your 8th house of shared resources, death, other people's money, taxes, your partner's money, transactions. It's a really weird house. And Jupiter also rules over your 11th house of friends and community and networks and other people. So Jupiter is going to be in your 11th house of friends, right? So you're going to be expanding your friendships, expanding your networks, expanding your communities. Jupiter ruling your 8th house, this might be integrating yourself more into them, whether it's through borrowing or through transactions. And so I think you're really going to be really enjoying meeting people, talking to people, and just enjoying what friendships you do have, regardless of what they look. You probably will be romanticizing these friendships maybe more than they need to, but that's okay. Have fun with it. After that, though, Jupiter will enter Aries, and it's super funny. Earlier today, I was just talking to a Taurus rising about this. You're going to remember why you're a Taurus. Jupiter rules your 11th house of friends, and it's going into your 12th house of hidden enemies, secrets, the subconscious, isolation, alienation. So the friendship planet going into the house of hidden enemies, sounds like you might be spending a little bit more time alone than normal. Jupiter does rule your 8th house. So again, you're kind of someone who doesn't really mind, getting a lot of passion by, getting into the intense side of yourself. I just think as Jupiter goes into Aries, you might be cutting out some of the friendships that you had gained and, maybe singling out a few of those important friendships. So Gemini, Jupiter rules your 7th house of relationships, other people. Now, this isn't, it's romantic relationships. It's all that stuff. It's your doctor. It's your lawyer. It's anyone. It's also open enemies too. It could be, anyone who you got to throw hands with. Jupiter not only rules your 7th house of other individuals, but it also rules your 10th house of career, reputation, and legacy. As Jupiter transits this sign, you're going to be expanding your work, expanding your legacy, expanding your title. For example, if Jupiter was in your 6th house, it would be like you're going to do more work. This is much more of like raising your title, raising, the bar of who you are. Like, again, if Jupiter was in your sixth house, I'd be like, you're going to be doing more work. You may make more money, but you ain't getting a better title. You're just going to do more. This is much more like getting acknowledgement, being seen much more. This has to do with relationships. Some of you might even get married. Sometimes the 10th house rules marriage because, it's a public thing. But this is going to be good for your relationships. You might even be working with someone much more intentionally. At this point, a lot of expansion going on with your career. And then Jupiter enters your 11th house. Jupiter then goes into your 11th house of friendships and networks and communities. So your 10th house ruler of career is going into your 11th house ruler of friends. Sounds like you're going to be making some friends, or perhaps even being much more involved in your community or with groups of people that that associate with your work. Sounds pretty good for the most part, all in all. So now we get to Cancer. Cancer, Jupiter rules over your sixth house of your habits, your day-to-day activities, the labor that you do in the work, the way in which you make your money. It rules health, like bad health, so things not working all that well, but that's fine because you'll be fine. Anyway, Jupiter also rules your ninth house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education, spirituality, and beliefs. So Jupiter ruling your sixth house of work, going into your ninth house. Ninth house also rules publishing. Ninth house also rules communications a lot of the time. So your work's going to be increasing. Maybe you are going to be traveling more. Jupiter going through your ninth house, traveling to different countries. I know that sounds weird right now. Jupiter going through your ninth house, learning more about astrology, expanding your spirituality, learning more about health stuff, doing more work, expanding your work, right? That's what a lot of Jupiter and Pisces looks like. And then Jupiter will ingress into your 10th house, where your 10th house is all about your career, your legacy, how the world sees you. And it seems like a lot of this awesome stuff that you do with your 9th house, where you kind of explore yourself spiritually, you explore yourself, in your mind and what you believe, and maybe that has to do something with your day-to-day habits and your work, that then all of a sudden increases your actual title and your actual job. Jupiter going into Aries will, this isn't just expanding your work. This is expanding, your title, your duties, how much money you make, and the whole 9 yards. So that looks also pretty good. So then we get to Leo. Leo, Jupiter rules over your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, creativity, hobbies, recreation, all the fun stuff, really. What makes you you and unique? But Jupiter also rules your 8th house of shared resources, other people's money, debt, transactions, death, taxes. It's a weird, it also rules the occult and like secrets too. So Jupiter going through your 8th house, you're probably going to get pretty occulty, and you're probably going to be getting much more into mysticism and spirituality, but much more of the secretive stuff. Jupiter going through your 8th house, the 8th house rules inheritances too. So a lot of you might be getting an inheritance. Jupiter rules your 5th house and it's in the 8th. So maybe even your change of what you enjoy or what you find fun will be changing. And what's interesting is right after that, Jupiter then ingresses into your 9th house, where the 9th house is all about spirituality and religion and far distance travel and beliefs, where it just seems like this Jupiter 8th house, I wouldn't call it a dark night of the soul, but this vibe clearly is going to really supercharge your beliefs. And I think you're going to come out of this very, very confident, feeling very, very almost unstoppable. Jupiter and Aries in your 9th house is like you're really optimistic with what your beliefs are, and you feel very capable of, kind of everything that you're kind of going on. I just think maybe Jupiter and Pisces will be a time of questioning. Jupiter and Pisces will be a time of questioning your faith, and Jupiter and Aries will be like, no, I have all the faith in myself, homie, and you're just going to kind of go for it. So I love Jupiter and Aries for the Leos. Virgo. So Virgo, Jupiter rules over your 4th house of your home, your family, your living situation, your parents, your ancestry, your roots, your heritage, right? Jupiter also rules over your 7th house of relationships and other people. Any individual, it could be your doctor, your lawyer, it could be an open enemy, but it also rules marriage and your partner of significance. Jupiter's transiting your 7th house. So it's going to be expanding your relationships. It's going to be expanding your partnerships. So a lot of you single people are going to get in a relationship. And if you're already in a relationship, well, this isn't about you. This is about your partner, and they're probably going to be doing good. I don't know what's going on for the Virgo risings, but your relationship's going to be doing good. Anyway, I think you guys need this fun time with the relationship. You're going to be expanding relationship. Jupiter's going to conjoin Neptune. Things are going to be very romanticized. Things are going to be very idealistic. But then Jupiter goes into Aries, and Jupiter's going to enter your 8th house, where the 8th house rules shared resources, transactions, your partner's money, death, inheritance, other people's money. I feel like your 7th house ruler going into the 8th house is going to be like maybe, well, I've tried to tell some people, you guys might get married, so try not to get married all too quickly. But when Jupiter goes into Aries and goes into your 8th house, there's this kind of like, hey, look, maybe expanding debt, getting into debt, getting an inheritance of some kind too. This could possibly be a family member passing away. It does rule your 4th house, and that is what happens. So this could be utilizing your debt, utilizing some inheritance money that you have, something along those lines. So Jupiter in 8th house, honestly expect money coming towards you. I know that might sound weird, but anyway, Libra. So Libra, Jupiter rules over your 3rd house of rules. The 3rd house rules a lot of shit, but the 3rd house rules siblings. The 3rd house rules neighbors, short distance travel. 3rd house rules like your schedule. If the 9th house is like your spirituality and your religion, what you believe, the 3rd house is like, how do you use it? Like, how do you put what you know down on paper? Jupiter also rules your 6th house of your work, your day-to-day activities, your labor, the actual work that you put into things, your health, habits. Jupiter is going, and also rules pets too. Jupiter is going into your 6th house where it's going to be expanding this. So you're going to be probably doing more work. You're probably going to be doing more with your schedule. 3rd house ruling schedule too, and what you do. You're just going to be doing more in general, right? Jupiter and Pisces expanding more, but I think this is going to be really enjoyed. I think you're going to really romanticize your work. Things are going to be pretty fun for the most part. And then Jupiter goes into Aries, where Jupiter will then enter your 7th house. Their 7th house rules relationships, and that's all types of relationships. That's both romantic relationships. This is your dentist, your doctor. This is open enemies too. But your 6th house ruler going into your 7th house, there's a lot of your work that's going to be focused and engaged on individuals, and that's focused with the people and the relationships that are in your life. I think Jupiter going into your 7th house is probably an expansion of relationships. Some of you will probably be getting in a relationship when Mars comes in there too, so be prepared for that. Scorpio. So Scorpio, Jupiter rules your 2nd house of your money and your finances, your resources, what you own, what you possess, what's yours, what you value too. And Jupiter also rules your 5th house of love, romance, sex, gambling, fun, recreation, children, arts, music, creativity. As Jupiter's going through your 5th house, this area is going to be expanding in your life. A lot of you, sorry to say, a lot of you are going to have kids. A lot of you are going to have a lot of fun, though. A lot of you are going to be spending a lot of money on recreation. A lot of you are going to spend a lot of money on fun. A lot of you are going to be trying to figure out what you enjoy. And I think Jupiter going through your 5th house, you're going to be really, again, romanticizing this 5th house stuff, having a lot of fun, getting really into it. But then Jupiter is going to enter your 6th house, where the 6th house rules health, day-to-day activities, labor, like the work that you actually do, habits, pets too. And so Jupiter going into your 6th house is going to be expanding this area of your life. So whether you're doing more, I feel like you're going to have a lot of fun. And then after you're done having a lot of fun, it's time to do a lot of work. And it's time to make money, since Jupiter rules your 2nd house of money. You spend a lot of money, now it's time to make a lot of money. And that's that. So now Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius, Jupiter rules over your 1st house of yourself, of your body, your image, what you look like. I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with expanding a time or two, because that's what Jupiter does. But anyway, Jupiter rules over your 1st house of your body and yourself. Jupiter also rules over your 4th house of your home, your family, your living situation, your parents, your ancestry, your roots, where you're from. And as Jupiter goes into your 4th house and transits your 4th house, your home, your family, it's all going to be expanding. Jupiter going in your 4th house is going to be this rest, this relaxation. I think with Jupiter conjoining Neptune, you're going to be really romanticizing and idealizing your living situation. And also just a lot of this is going to be resting, because then once Jupiter goes into Aries, it's going to be going into your 5th house. And the 5th house rules love, romance, sex, passion, fun, recreation, creativity, children. And so it's kind of like you're going to be resting at home, and then Jupiter's going to go into Sagittarius, where it's all about having fun, expanding, what you kind of do, expanding, doing more of what you want to do, doing more recreational things, especially, from home or something like that. Capricorn. So Capricorn, Jupiter rules over your 12th house, which rules the subconscious, hidden enemies, isolation, alienation, repressed parts of yourself, things that you didn't see, stuff like that. Jupiter also rules over your 3rd house, which I call the junk drawer, because the 3rd house rules, are you ready? Siblings, neighbors, schedule, basic education, people that are around you, short distance travel, communication, all of that stuff, right? So Jupiter going into your third house, this is good for your siblings. This is good for your neighbors. You're probably going to be doing more short distance traveling. Jupiter's going to be on top of Neptune. So, I mean, like, you're going to be enjoying all of it. But I also think your 12th house, like things that maybe you've idealized in your head, will actually kind of manifest in this area of your life. So, like, maybe you move to a cute neighborhood that's really cool, or maybe your schedule is just really awesome and you're just enjoying it a lot. But then we get to Jupiter and Aries, and Jupiter is going to move into your fourth house, which the fourth house is all about family, home, your living situation, your parents. Jupiter going through here, maybe you move into a bigger place, maybe you expand your living situation. Either way, or maybe you're spending more time at home, maybe your schedule is more involved with home and family stuff or with sibling stuff. Anyway, it seems like things kind of get this weird shift towards home for whatever reason once Jupiter goes into Aries. Aquarius. So Aquarius, Jupiter rules over your 11th house of friends, networks, groups of people, communities that you involve yourself with. Jupiter also rules your second house of your money and your finances and your resources, things that you own, things that you possess, your values. Jupiter is going to be expanding this area, so you'll probably be making more money. You'll probably be buying more things because Jupiter likes to expand what you own in your second house. If you make more money, you're going to be spending it, right? This also might involve friends and networks and communities in some way. But then as we get into Jupiter moving into Aries, this is where this goes into your third house. Now, the third house I like to call the junk drawer because the third house rules short distance travel. It rules neighbors. It rules siblings. It rules extended family members. It rules communication. It rules courses and basic education. So I just think Jupiter going to Aries, maybe you have more time to yourself, and maybe you're utilizing your schedule more, trying to spend more time doing more things. With Mars being there too, I think you're just going to be really taking a lot of action, especially with people and friends that are within your close community that are closest to you. Pisces. So Pisces, Jupiter rules over your 10th house of career, networks, how the public sees you. Sometimes it rules marriage, but don't get too excited. It also rules just your career in general, your title mostly, like your label, not necessarily like the physical work that you do. It's more 6th house, but like how the world sees you. Jupiter also rules your 10th house. Your first house of yourself, your body, your image. Jupiter is going to be transiting your first house where your body can expand. Jupiter is going to be expanding this area. You're going to be seeing yourself in a much more hopeful and optimistic way. And you're just going to be really positive because I also think career stuff is going to be going really, really well for you. Just try not to gain too much weight because that's just a Jupiter thing. You're talking to a Jupiter ruled person. I've experienced this. But then as we go into spring and summer, Jupiter enters your second house. The second house rules your money, your finances, your resources, your possessions. And as your 10th ruler of career goes into Pisces and is doing really, really, really good, Jupiter then going into your second house is like, man, you're going to start making more money. You're going to start buying more things. And you're just going to be expanding all the things that you own. So this all looks really, really good for the career stuff for Pisces. So that's pretty much what's going on for the zodiac signs for Jupiter and Pisces. Now, I know a lot of you probably aren't making it or probably have made it all the way to the very end of this video. But anyway, if you have made it to the end of this video, please give me a like if you really like this video. It does really support me. Comment what you guys are most excited for or what you think is going to be happening for you as Jupiter transits Pisces. I'd love to know what your guys' predictions are in the comments below. As well, if you want to support me making more content like this that has graphics and that has animations and everything like that, and if you want access to monthly horoscopes as well as bonus content that you're not going to see on YouTube, consider becoming a patron over at my Patreon. It truly helps me out. And I do give out bonus content. I don't have like a schedule. I kind of just do things that I know you guys would like. But anyway, consider doing that. It does support me and supports this channel. Plus, you get, a ton of goodies along with it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you. And I hope you enjoy your Jupiter and Pisces transit.